Hello, everyone, and welcome to Irish Football Fan TV. This is the final word from Ukraine 1, Republic of Ireland 1, and I'm joined by Gary Spain, who was in Lodz for the game. Gary, how are we, and how was the trip?
All good, Paul. It was a great trip. I just got back yesterday evening. It's actually quite a nice spot. I'd actually stayed there during the Euros to get away from all the madness. And I was actually pleasantly surprised because it felt a bit of a dump in 2012, but the centre was actually quite nice. It was a great trip, great atmosphere, loads of Irish fans there, and a fantastic performance and a really great result. In many ways, we could have even won the game.
Yeah, and now I only saw the highlights myself. Well, I saw the first half, but I only saw the highlights of the second half. But from what I did see, a lot of positives to take from it anyway, that's for sure. We'll start off with the team anyway, and then I'll ask your opinion on it because it's been fairly similar for the four games anyway. So it started off with it was a 5-3-2 formation transitioning into a 3-5-2 sort of, which is usually the case for those two formations. Kelleher in goal, Alan Brown at right back, Darragh Lenihan, Nathan Collins, and Dara O'Shea down in the centre of defence. James McLean, who was the captain on Tuesday at left wing back. The midfield the same as Saturday: Jason Malumbi, Josh Cullen, and Jason Knight. And up front, Troy Parrott and Scott Hogan. Now, Gary, what did you make of that team? Probably the best we could have fielded with all the injuries and suspensions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I suppose it was a couple of surprises for me. I was a little bit surprised Scott Hogan started maybe ahead of Callum Robinson or even Chidozie Ogbene, who I assume was fully fit. He was available and did come off the bench. So I suppose Scott Hogan will probably claim he had that goal chalked off against Scotland. I wonder if we had the GDS for that, would that have been allowed? It looked over the line to me. So, yeah, that was probably the only surprise, I suppose, given who was available and the options that were there. The young midfield maybe is interesting with, Josh Cullen, I think, has become a mainstay at the moment. But Jason Malumbi getting in ahead of Jeff Hendrick was an interesting call. But I think he's actually somebody who was in favour with Stephen and then very much fell out of favour. I think he's done himself a lot of good in his performances, particularly against Scotland, but even his hour in Łódź was really impressive as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'd completely agree. I think the midfield has been a lot better since Hendrick has dropped out. And I think as much as I do like Hendrick and I think he's given a lot to Ireland, I think it was time for him to drop out just simply because maybe he was getting a bit too comfortable. And I think Malumbi's taken that by the scruff of the neck and he's been fantastic in the last two games anyway, particularly on Saturday against Scotland. We'll start to go through the bit of the big moments throughout the game, which was actually a very entertaining game from the highlights anyway, from what I saw, and even in the first half, very good. So we'll start off with the first big moments for Ireland. Troy Parrott's miss. He's come out and said he should be scoring chances like that. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think, look, first of all, it was great work by Jason Knight to set up the chance. But yes, I agree. For a striker, an informed striker, it came to him. There was nobody near him. He had actually, if you look at the angle on TV from behind the goal, he actually has a fairly big target at the far post to aim for. And I think he should have hit that target. It was a glorious chance. And but I don't want to take too much from Troy because I thought he did really, really well. And he's been a real success. He was excellent against Scotland as well, having maybe made not such a good start in Yerevan. But other than that miss, which I agree, I think he should have scored. He said it himself. He probably should have scored. Yeah, that he had a really excellent game.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought he was brilliant against Scotland as well. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Unfortunately, he couldn't take the chance. But look, he's got a couple of goals under his belt now for Ireland. He starts becoming more consistent at club level, at the higher level as well. He'll be flying. But who knows what's going to happen? We're only at the start of the transfer window and at the start of the summer, so we don't know if he's going to still be at Spurs to help out with the squad numbers. But it looks like they are buying a lot of players in and in forward positions as well. We move on to the 31st minute and the moment of the night for all the Irish fans. Nathan Collins' fantastic goal. Won the ball just over the halfway line. Ran by three players and buried it as coolly as one of the strikers would have. Gary, fantastic goal.
What a goal, and what a player. I mean,
Yep.
he's been absolutely superb this window, and he was absolutely superb. I mean, he was my man of the match. But as you said, he intercepted the ball and went on that run, beat three players, and what a finish. Any striker would have been proud of that finish with the outside of his right foot. And yeah, look, we've been scoring some wonderful goals lately. The second and third goals against Scotland and Nathan Collins' goal against Ukraine were top draw stuff. And he's someone we'd probably go on and talk about afterwards. But what a goal, what a finish, and what a performance.
Yeah, definitely, completely agree. We move on. We get to half time. We're 1-0 ahead. What are you thinking at half time, Gary? Are you confident to go on and get the 3 points?
Yeah, I was actually, and I was actually saying at halftime to a couple of people near me, we were actually at that stage top of the group. Had we won the game, and it was a bit ironic because I think only a few days ago people were scoffing at the fact we can't win the group. I'll accept we cannot win the group, but people were saying Stephen Kenny's earlier prediction to win the group, we would have actually finished the June window on top of the group had we won the game. It was looking good at halftime, but Ukraine were also playing really well, and they've got some real quality players. So I was always wary of the backlash, and but I thought, look, we had a really good first 45 minutes. We were in good shape. We looked solid at the back because we didn't actually look that solid against Scotland, despite the clean sheet. But at halftime, I felt really good about the first 45 minutes and thought we had a real good chance of winning the game and topping the group.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree myself. And I did see the first half very, very impressive. But obviously, it's always in the back of your head. You have to start strong in the second half. Unfortunately, conceded after 47 minutes. I think it's Dalvik is the goal scorer. No, he's
yes,
yeah.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it
Yeah.
either. Yeah.
Now, to be fair to him, I did see him against Scotland and in a couple of the other games. He played in the Aviv as well. He's actually a very impressive player and he's a really good international footballer. So he'd be delighted with the goal, but for us, not so much.
No, we were caught. I mean, I think James McLean was caught too far up, and they got far too much space on the right hand side, and the cross. I think there was actually three of them queuing up unmarked at the other post to slot in the cross. So it was a well worked goal from their point of view, but a disastrous start to the second half from our point of view, having worked so hard to gone one up to give away the lead basically in the second minute of the second half.
Yeah. And obviously, as the second half went on, both teams were kind of trading blows. But one positive from Ireland was we didn't really look up against it like we usually do when we concede goals like that.
No, and that's actually a very good point because we were never really in the situation where we were kind of just sitting back and under the caution, under huge pressure. Sure, Ukraine played well and they had chances, but we also had a go at them, and we could have won the game. They could have won the game. It was one of those games. I think definitely it was a fair result, but it was one of those games that either side could have won it.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. That leaves Ukraine on top with 7 points, Scotland in second on 6 points, Ireland in third on 4 points, and Armenia in last position in fourth on 3 points. Gary, it's going to be a tough ask with the two teams ahead of us with games in hand, but can we still win the group, or do we need results to go our way?
I don't think we can win the group, Paul. Realistically, I think Scotland and Ukraine also have games in hand, and they're going to be battling it out for 6 points. So I actually think Ukraine will win the group. They'll probably win it comfortably, but I think second place is very much up for grabs. And my thinking is that we will, if we need a playoff. Now, hopefully, we won't need a playoff. We'll finish top two in our qualifying group, but that could be very difficult, and we could have a very difficult group. So it depends on the draw in October. I think second place will probably be enough in the end for a playoff. It all depends on who else qualifies that are higher ranked than us, etc., etc. But I think if we were to get second place in our group, we would get a playoff. And I think second place is very attainable. There's a couple of ways we can do it. If we win our 2 games in September, I think we'd be pretty much guaranteed second place. And I reckon if we draw in Glasgow and beat Armenia at home, that'll probably be enough. Scotland would need to take 2 points or better from Ukraine. And frankly, I think Ukraine are a much, well, it's not even in doubt, actually. They proved it in Glasgow in the World Cup qualifier. They just blew Scotland away. And probably even more emphatically than we blew them away in Dublin. So, look, we're capable of going to Glasgow and winning. And I'm sure that's what Stephen's going to be looking at. But I think even a draw would be a reasonable result away from home. And I think if we avoid defeating Glasgow and beat Armenia at home, which should be well within our compass, then I think that should be enough for second place. I really can't see Scotland beating Ukraine. I think Ukraine are on a different level to Scotland. So we'd want to be really unfortunate. I'm sure the mathematicians can work out a scenario of results that would allow us to win the group. But that actually also would involve Ukraine not beating Armenia, because if Ukraine beat Armenia, actually, we cannot finish ahead of them because of the head-to-head rules. But so we can't win the group. It's totally out of our hands. It needs some really, really improbable results for it to happen. So, but I think second place is well within our grasp.
Yeah, completely agree. And it'd be nice to even kind of know you're kind of 75% guaranteed that playoff even before you go into your group stage matches or group stage qualifying for the European Championships next season. Sorry, I'm all over the place with this Winter World Cup. I don't know where I am. But anyway, we'll move on. I just want to talk about some of the things from the game. So the midfield trio of Jason Knight, Josh Cullen and Jason Malumbi have started the last 2 games and been very, very energetic, very, very lively, and have produced a lot of good moments for us. Do you want to see that the same midfield again come September? Obviously, there'll be injuries, stuff like that. It's the start of the season. We don't know who's going to be set, who's going to be not. Would you like to see that continued?
Yeah, now in some ways, Jason Knight is in some ways the ideal, because he's also, when we play with 3 up top, Jason is also probably one of the 3, and he's one of those that maybe links the midfield and attack. But yes, my short answer would be yes. I think Josh Cullen, he's an automatic starter now. I think he starts every game. I don't think it's even in doubt. And I think Jason Knight, I think, is also going to play. Whether it's part of a 3 up top as one of those number 10s, or whether it's maybe we've got a bit overrun with the 2 in midfield, particularly earlier in this June window against Armenia away and things like that, and even the Ukraine B team at home. So I think we do need maybe Jason further back in midfield, but I think he's also going to start. And I think Jason Malumbi has done really, really well, and he's probably edged out the likes of Jeff Hendrick or Conor Horan or even Alan Brown, who can also maybe play in there. So for me, I think that hopefully everyone's fit and available, but I think that would be our midfield 3.
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree. I think they've been fantastic. And as I was saying to Paul over the last week or so, even before the Scotland game, there's more energy from the 3 of them. There's just more energy. And I think I'm not saying they lack quality altogether, but maybe they lack that kind of Wes Hoolahan pass, that cut-through pass. But they can win the ball high like Jason Malumbi did on Saturday. Win the ball, gives it to Parrott. Parrott gives to Obafemi, goal. That's what we need. That's what we're good at. And that's what we should stick with. And I think if the boys, if they're fit, the formation suits them. And I always think if you have a midfield 3, you need three boys or 3 lads who are going to run around, are going to get stuck in, are going to go all the way. One more advanced than the other 2, maybe. Always works well in that formation. And look, listen, if we can keep going like that, long may it continue. We'll move on to a couple of lads who might be making a move this summer. Now, obviously, Nathan Collins is being talked about today in the in the papers and the media and stuff like that. I haven't heard who he's being linked with, but there's a lot of money being thrown around. Gary, do you see him moving off from Burnley this season, or it might be a bit too early?
You see, I'm wondering. He's definitely good enough to play in the Premier League, and I actually am sorry Burnley got relegated, because that would have been ideal. Vincent Kompany is going to be his manager if he stays next season, and what a centre back he was! What a player to learn from. But it would be at the Championship, and ideally we want our players playing at as high a level as possible. One of the clubs I saw, Paul, is actually your boys in Arsenal, as being linked with him. Now, I think Arsenal could certainly do with him. My concern would be at this stage, and he's just turned 21, which is very young for a centre-half. Normally, centre-halves don't really develop till they're at least 23, 24 to be playing regularly at the highest level. Players in other positions maybe develop that little bit quicker. My concern would be if he goes to a Premier League club, that if he doesn't get regular game time, because he's certain to start every week with Burnley, and I know Arsenal have been tracking him even when he was at Stoke.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe he's just good enough to go into the Arsenal team straight away. He may well be. I mean, I don't know where the limit is for this guy, because he's just been absolutely superb.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you think of Nathan Collins, you compare him as a footballer in general to Gabriel and Ben White. Now, maybe Ben White might be a better footballer than him, but he's not a better defender, in my opinion. Gabriel might be a better defender, but he's not a better footballer. So he'd probably suit the two of them, if you know what I mean, because he can do both. So why not? Why not gamble on him? See, I think that's a problem with Premier League clubs, and it's even with young English centre halves. You look at the likes of Tarkowski, Lewis Dunk, people like that, who've been very, very good for a consistent number of years, who could do a job ahead of the likes of who Arsenal have signed in the last few years, ahead of, say, Christensen at Chelsea, someone like that. Someone who's a tiny bit overrated because they play for a higher club. Why not gamble on these young lads? And I think if Arsenal did get him, which they're going to need a bigger squad next season with Europe, Thursday, Sunday football, it's going to be needed. And I think you get him for a decent enough price. Burnley are going to need money this season, and Kompany's going to come in. He's going to change a couple of things around. He's going to bring in his own boys, and and if it doesn't work from the get-go, he could be gone fairly quickly. But he's going to have to change something with boys leaving as well. So yeah, I think it'd be worth to go for Arsenal personally, but who knows? It's going to be a long summer anyway. One other player I do want to talk about is Gavin Bazunu, who looks like he's about to finalise his move to Southampton in the coming hours. Gary, what do you make of this? Now, I know a couple of Portsmouth fans won't be too happy with this now, but look, it's a big move for him, and a big price tag. Big price tag.
Yeah, it's a big move. It's great for Shamrock Rovers as well. I think they're going to get about £2 million out of the fee and make about £3 million overall in the Gavin Bazunu transfer, according to the Irish Independent today anyway. Look, it would be a fantastic move. I know they've signed Willie Caballero, but I think we've talked a few times on these shows that I think Willie's going there as very much a backup goalkeeper. That's an older keeper who's not going to play anymore, but just going to keep himself fit and be available for those few games if he's called upon through injuries. So I hope Gavin is going there as number one. It's probably between himself and Alex McCarthy. And I think Gavin's a better keeper. I think that's another keeper actually at one stage could have played for us, if I remember way back when whatever the rules were at the time. But I think Gavin's a much better keeper, even though he's another young player. And I think it's a great opportunity for him to play week in, week out in the Premier League. And I know he's good enough. And he's for such a young man, he's got a very old head on his shoulders. He's very, very mature, very confident, very, very sensible. And I think, look, he's just a fantastic person. And I think he's going to make a really great keeper. And I do see the reports that Man City have inserted a buyback clause in the deal, and which is probably a good thing all around, because he wasn't going to displace Ederson at this point. But I mean, if he goes to Southampton and proves to be the goalkeeper I think a lot of us expect him to be, City may well be exercising that buyback clause.
Yeah, definitely. I think Pep Guardiola might have a bit to do with that. Anyway, that's for sure. Do you think Queven Kelleher will do the same? Now, there's been a bit of talk he's going to go back to Liverpool when pre-season starts, and he's going to have a word with Klopp. Do you see him maybe moving on as well?
Yeah, you see, it's a real tricky one. I mean, he's just come off playing 4 games in 90 minutes in just over a week and a half, and when's he going to play again? When's he going to play competitive football? I mean, I think he will have a conversation with Jurgen Klopp. Now, having said that, he's working with one of the top. Alisson Becker is one of the top, arguably, actually between Ederson and Alisson Becker, you possibly got two best goalkeepers in the world. So he is working with some of the top coaches in the world, one of the top goalkeepers in the world, and he's going to pick up so much. But at some point in your career, I mean, Queven's actually a couple of years older than Gavin, and at some point in your career, you're going to have to go and play week in, week out in men's football, and so maybe a loan is best for Queven. I actually see today, I think Nottingham Forest were signing Dean Henderson from Manchester United.
Yeah.
Maybe that was one of the opportunities that could have been ideal for Queven to go to maybe a newly promoted or one of the lower Premier League clubs, or possibly one of the championship clubs as well. If he stays at Liverpool, maybe he'd be guaranteed the League Cup, the FA Cup games, maybe pick up a couple of Champions League group games if Liverpool are already through. But Alisson Becker doesn't seem to get injured that very often, doesn't pick up suspensions. So will that be enough game time for Queven? And the conversation would be interesting, but I wonder, would he benefit more from a season long and loan? I don't think Liverpool are going to sell him in the way that City, because he is the undisputed backup. Whereas in City's case, they also had a backup keeper. So if Gavin had gone back there, he probably would have been third choice. But maybe 12 months on loan might be best. But it's the balance as well, because Liverpool are going to be looking at what's best for them as well as just what's best for Queven.
Completely agree. I think Klopp will want them to stay anyway. But look, I think you see how much more experienced Gavin Bazunu is than him, simply because he's played more matches even in the League of Ireland, and it's chalk and cheese really. But look, yeah, one other player, now just because I saw in the comments, there's a couple of other players I wanted to mention, but one is Josh Cullen, and the comment here from Satoshi Corner is, do you see Josh Cullen moving back to England? Always impressed with him as a six with Ireland. Now, Vincent Kompany, as we mentioned, has just gone to Burnley. Maybe that's not the best of moves, but could you see him following suit?
I hope he doesn't go back to Burnley. Sorry, any Burnley fans watching, because look, Josh is playing with Anderlecht, one of the probably the most famous club in Belgium, but certainly one of the top, even at current levels, and they're not what they were, the club they were, still one of the top 3 or 4 clubs in Belgium. He's playing every week in one of the really, really good leagues. So if he does go back to England, I hope it's to a Premier League club, and certainly one of the better Premier League clubs. Will he go back? I'm not so sure. I'm actually quite happy to have him playing on the continent, and maybe we'd benefit from having more of our players playing in different leagues across Europe. I'm really hoping some of our lads can break through in Italy. So, yeah, Josh doesn't have to go back to England. Why not go to... If he wants to go to a better league than Belgium, why not go to Germany or go to Spain or go to Italy? I mean, plenty of clubs around the continent do look at the likes of Anderlecht, Bruges, Standard in Belgium, etc., and maybe pick their better players. So I really hope it's not Burnley. I know Vincent Kompany will obviously know what Josh can do. And but I think Josh is probably better suited to the way they play football on the continent than certainly in the Championship.
Yeah, and let's not forget they are guaranteed Europe this year, Anderlecht, whether that be the Conference League or the Europa League. So if I was if I was Josh anyway, I'd be looking to get at least the group stage under my belt in Europe for just sheer experience and stuff like that, and see what it's like, because it'd be fantastic. And look, Anderlecht are a huge club. You want the big clubs in Europe. You want to see them. And look, I remember Anderlecht taking points off Arsenal not too long ago in the Champions League, so I know how big and how good they actually are. And that was at the Emirates as well, but we won't go into that too deeply. There's just one more question here, and then we'll leave it at that, Gary. I know you were talking about it earlier, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be what I think it is, but it's from Connor Lynch. I know it's early to think about, but do you think the Ireland team will be in pot 3 or pot 2 when the next qualifiers come? I think it's guaranteed pot 3. Is it, Gary?
It's pretty much guaranteed pot 3. It's the only way we can get into pot 2 is if we win the group, we're in pot 2. And the only other team from League B that actually makes pot 2 is the best of the second place teams. And even with 2 wins, I'd have to look. I'm a little bit off the top of my head now. I'd have to study the other groups closely. But even if we were to win the 2 games in September, I think it's very, very unlikely we'd actually get best second place among the other 4 League B groups. So I think we can take it. We're pretty much nailed on in pot 3. And the concern I have is if you're looking, I did actually do some looking at League A. And if you look at League A, there's going to be 10 teams from League A in pot 1. And then, but you go down to pot 2, we have to leave Germany out as hosts. You go down to pot 2 from League A. The likes of England and France look like they could end up in pot 2. And obviously the likes of Ukraine, who are, I think, almost nailed on to win our group. So I don't think we'd fancy Ukraine out of pot 2. But I don't think, well, maybe the FAI might fancy England or France from pot 2 because it would be very lucrative. But you could end up with a group of Spain, England, Republic of Ireland, and then somebody like Turkey from pot 4. And even Northern Ireland from pot 5. There's your ultimate group of death or whatever like that. But so it is potentially, we could get a very tough draw in October. And I was actually looking at the pot 2 teams as well, and even the pot 1 ones. And there's not too many you'd actually fancy. I would like Iceland. It's a nice trip as well as being one of the more winnable ties. You're looking who else up there. I mean, even our old friends like Switzerland and Denmark, they're probably just too good for us at the moment. And so that's why I think finishing second in our Nations League group is really important, because it will probably get us a playoff. Again, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, but I think my own view is if we get second, we probably will get a playoff. If we finish fourth and get relegated, we definitely won't get a playoff. If we finish third, it's probably unlikely that we get a playoff. So that's why I think it's important to have a good September and hopefully get at least second. But we are going to be we're going to be in pot 3 for the draw. I think that's pretty much guaranteed. We can't actually be in pot 4 because Russia are going to take the pot 4 spot if they're in the draw in October, and from League B. So that at least we don't have to worry about that. But I think pot 3 is pretty much guaranteed at this point.
Fair enough. Gary, you're an encyclopedia on the game. Fair play to you. And I think we will leave it at that there, folks. Thanks very much to everyone for the last couple of weeks. It's been a bit of crack anyway, and enjoy the summer. We'll have a couple of things out as well. I think there's a few things coming up as well. Thanks to Gary. And obviously the League of Ireland is still on as well, so that we'll all be at games over the coming weeks. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks to Gary again, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.